Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another Inside Turkey panel organized by SETA Foundation. Today, we will be talking about our new book, which is off the press, and the book is entitled On Climate Migration. And we have three distinguished speakers, Dr. Rabia from Pakistan, Dr. Burak from Türkiye, and Dr. Yunus from Taiwan. Today we will be talking about the nexus between climate change and migration. But before we start, let me introduce you our panelists. Dr. Rabia has a PhD in English literature with a research fellow of America. Her research interests include post-colonial literature, post-9/11 Pakistani fiction, comparative literature, literary theory, esoteric criticism, and post-colonial environmental ethic. Dr. Yunus is an assistant professor in the Department of Arabic Language and Culture at the National Chengchi University in Taiwan. He completed his PhD in Islamic and Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Edinburgh in 2018. His research focuses on migration, refugee-related issues in the Middle East. And Dr. Burak Güneş graduated from the Faculty of Political Sciences, Department of International Relations at Ankara University. With the Ministry of National Education Scholarship, he studied international law at the University of Sussex Law School and completed his master's degree with his thesis on private military companies and the responsibility of states. Dr. Güneş began to work as a research assistant in the International Relations Department at Kırşehir Evran University in 2013. He earned the title of PhD in 2019 with his doctoral thesis entitled International Law on States Arming Non-State Groups in the Other States. He has been working as an assistant professor in the International Relations Department at Kırşehir Evran University since 2021. And please join me to welcome our panelists today to our panel. And before we start, let me quickly provide you with a short recap on the background of this panel, how it came to into being. About a year ago, we published an issue on climate change and migration in 2022. In this issue, we received articles that deal with the migration and climate change related issues from different fields. And after publishing this issue, we decided to organize a panel in the summer of 2022, which went very successful. And this, after this panel, we decided to publish a book with our participants. Today we have three contributors to this book, and hopefully today we will be talking about this book in particular, but we will also be talking about the nexus between climate change and migration. As you are all aware of, climate change and migration are two major phenomena that are constantly changing our planet. And of course, they need a broad perspective to comprehend. And there are basically two major debates that are linked to one another. The first concerns environmental and climatic factors in migration and their relationship to other push or pull factors, whether social, political, or economic. And the second dispute concerns the political structure under which environmental migration should occur and how those who relocate should be treated. And our recently published book deals with these two major debates in 13 chapters. And the book is entitled On Climate Migration, Exploring Cases from Türkiye and Beyond. This edited volume aims to present an alarming and innovative perspective on climate change via case studies from all across the globe. And secondly, the book provides a fresh insight into the issue of migration from the vantage point of global and regional dynamics that force people to migrate. Overall, I can say that the edited volume aims to encourage international organizations and governments to find long-term solutions to this ever-changing process. And today we have three distinguished speakers who will be talking about their contribution to this edited volume. And I would like to start with Dr. Rabia Aamir from Pakistan. Thank you very much, Doctor, for accepting our invitation and sparing your precious time tonight with us. And yes, before I pass the microphone over to you, I would like to remind our audience that Dr. Rabia Aamir will talk about her contribution, and we will have a Q&A session afterwards. So if you have any questions, please send those questions through our social media channels, because the panel is being broadcast online at the SETA YouTube channel. So you can just type in your question there. We will just take that question and direct it to our speaker. Yes, the floor is yours, Dr. Rabia.
Thank you, Ibrahim. I am really honored to be a part of this panel, and I'm honored that my chapter was selected to be a part of this book, this anthology. And it is basically about, it talks about the landscape change, or the change in landscape of an Arab place. And by that I mean the Middle Eastern part of the world, which is Palestine. So this chapter is basically deals with the changed landscape of this Arab place. And I talk about the forced displacement as an environmental ethical concern. So and as a case study in this chapter, I have taken a book, a memoir of Ghada Karmi, who's a well-known doctor. And basically, she's a doctor of medicine, but she writes about, and she writes it with an eloquence of a novelist. And she talks about, in this book, basically, she talks about how back in 2005, she goes back to her birthplace, which is Jerusalem, and what all she encounters there, the difficulties and the evictions or the migrations, like herself, her family. Her father was a very well-known linguist in British BBC, and she in this memoir, and in her earlier memoir, which was like back in 2002, that memoir, she talks about how their family had to move out of the place where they had been living throughout generations. And it's not just her own story. There are so many, now the social media, we see so many these evictions, and especially these forced evictions in the environs of Jerusalem. We saw at the dawn of this third decade of this millennium in the 21st century. So this narrative of an anglicized Arab woman, Ghada Karmi, who was forced to leave the place of her birth and childhood, it raises many questions, not just for her, for everyone around the world. So why was then there a need, and why did this landscape change, and why these evictions, why these forced migrations, why this big diaspora of Palestinian diaspora around the world? So my chapter basically talks about all these issues, and then it also talks about how environmentalism, what is the difference basically between environmentalism and environmental ethics, That is my main theoretical lens that I'm using to see this phenomenon. And this Sheikh Jarrah incidents again, yet again, shook our understandings about the places, and the sheer tenacity in which we all saw in different clips, how the sheer tenacity of the attacks, and then the evictions, and the scuffles. It makes us raise questions. So Agatha Karmi herself, she was born in 1939 in Jerusalem, was raised there, but when she was around 10 years of age, her family had to move out, right? And what all she writes in her memoir, incidentally, now we find this the similar narrative in that Netflix movie, which was very controversialized, this 2021 movie of Farah. I'm sure that filming that depiction you might have gone through, you might have seen. So there are many other writers like Salman Abu Sitta, who's called the geography of Palestine. He being in from Beersheba, and an old Palestinian family of that, he talks about the same kind of a situation where his memoir is called Mapping My Return, a Palestinian memoir. Then we also find many other even Jewish writers. For example, we have Miko Pili's The General's Son, Amira Haas's, Drinking the Sea at Gaza, Days and Nights in a Land Under Siege. That was her memoir back in 1999. So, and then Raja El-Busaela's work. I talk about all these, I touch upon all these in my chapter. And he also talks about, Busaela also talks about In the Land of My Birth, the Palestinian boyhood. His memoir was, he came out in 2017. So basically, what are we talking about? Basically, if we talk about environmentalism, and I'm talking about environmental ethic. So the contention or the argument of the whole chapter, it revolves around this thing that how environmental ethics, it checks the blanket assertions of environmentalism, and it foregrounds the ethical rationale of the existence of a place with its historical manifestations, and exposing the ideological and this memoir, and through this memoir and through this sorts of forced evictions, we come to understand the ideological and interpellative strategies of the occupying forces. So environmental ethics, therefore, supports measures for decolonization or environmental resistance movements, so that social justice, peace, and stability of a region may prevail. And the environmental injustices meted out towards this land and its people is the focus of this whole chapter. And then when she talks about Jimzu Palace, Jimzu, a village east of the town of Al Ramallah, in pre-1948 Palestine, she says that the village was built on a hillside surrounded by cactus plants and olive trees before it was demolished in September 1948 by Palestinian new owners. So if she's talking about 1948, we see the similar patterns of, negating the people, the living people of that land, even today. So then, for example, she shows, or when she uses these phrases like a garden variety bigotry, a garden variety bigotry, it has the environmental undertones also, but it also talks about the resistance aspect and the elements which are the Palestinian people are facing day in and day out. And then we also come across, like I also talk about in this chapter about Nadia Abul Haj's, when she talks about assumed nations, this particular chapter in her book. So these kind of, I hope I'm not overstepping the time. Ibrahim, please let me know if that be so.
A few more minutes, please.
A few, okay. So now, for example, I was talking about Hass's book, and Hass's book, Amira Hass's book. She's a Jewish reporter, and her memoir, Drinking the Sea at Gaza, Days and Nights in the Land of the Siege, it's a memoir concerned with the time period of Hass's life when she starts living in Gaza to understand this microcosm of Gaza. And it is a detailed account of the life and plight of Gazans through the pen of a Jewish reporter who chooses to live among her brethren in humanity and to tell the truth about them with her experiences. So it may be Amira Hass, it may be Pili, it may be Wittgenstein, it may be Masad, and many other quoted in this chapter are some examples of organic intellectuals, to use Said's terms, who choose to speak truth to the power. And they're speaking about these forced evictions or these migrations which the people of Palestine had to undergo and yet are undergoing. Then I also talk about there is a well-known but little publicized prejudice which Karmi talks about among Ashkenazi Jews in Israel against Arab or Oriental Jews, which led to a variety of attitudes and practices that discriminated against them. So it's not just that only Palestinians are facing all these. These are some of the things that I talk about. And then I also talk about the Ramallah, the place Ramallah, and she talks about it. Landlocked place 6 miles north of Jerusalem with a population of about 300,000 people and a popular summer resort for the well-to-do Palestinians before 1948, how it gets destroyed, how it gets compromised, how land appropriation takes place, and it gets distorted by decades of military occupation. So this whole, she tells us that the whole character of this Palestinian place is appropriated in terms of its food, its customs, its traditions, by confiscating much of their lands and livelihoods. So even the traditional Arab dishes like hummus and falafel, they are also being called Israeli increasingly. So all these things get discussed in this chapter. And I also talk about the Palestinian businessmen who own very small businesses, and they're unable to because they can't get any further other livelihood. And then she also talks about, and I have given examples how the traffic lights are called Ramzons by their Hebrew names, and the whole milieu, all cities, they're named after different Hebrew names. And Ramallah's agricultural land, it is hemmed in the towns on all sides, making it its expansion impossible. So things like this, and this is a kind of a colonial imperialism that is manifest in many regions of the Middle East. And it is a region which is repeatedly being occupied, destroyed, and reinstituted by puppet regimes before and after the Arab Spring, with the most devastating outcomes, as the historians argue. So this all gets discussed in the chapter. And Karmi is implicitly critiquing the Jewish myths, championing that this land should be only inhabited by Jews with their tall claims for the last century or so. As Said also argues, how Jerusalem was converted from a multicultural to a multi-religious city into a principally Jewish one. So that's not the norm of the place, and the people have to. Then I also talk about the truncated villages and the walled silences that are like. So this is basically a very seriously blinkered logic, and it's time that we can aspire for a more historically answerable and geographically expansive sense of what constitutes our environment and which literary works we we entrust to voice its parameters. So taking this as a case in point, she talks about the settlements and the apartheid walls, which are like 10 meters high, and they block the sun and the sunlight also at many places. So this is raising an environmental ethical question, that by what justification should this appropriation of land be happening under, the regimes of the Palestinian authorities? Basically, that's what she's questioning in her book also. And Green Line, that, Palestinian spaces on both sides of the Green Line, but like Sherry Polonsky, she writes in her 2018 book, Palestinian Citizens of Israel and Power Resistance and the Struggle for Space. That's a very informative, and it's a very informed, thorough book about how these migrations have to, they are not migrations, but forced evictions. And the brazen-faced attitude. And then, like, the irony in this term, Green Line, raises or should raise a pertinent question in our minds as we travel with Karmi and her friends. And we find that how, on one side, we have different like settlements. And on the other side, immediately, if you look here on the other side, it is dusty, improvised himsa. So, I quote one small little line: "The place looked deserted, unnaturally quiet, like a ghost town. There were about 15 demonstrators around already. There was a demonstration on the walls. And they had gathered there. So, and then very interestingly, Benny Morris and yes, am I overstepping the time?
It would be great if you can just round up and finish it.
Yeah, it's last minute only.
Okay.
Okay. So Moshe Dayan and Benny Morris's quotes are very, eye-opening. And when they say, "Let us not today fling accusations at the murderers. Who are we that we should argue against their hatred? For 8 years now, they sit in there," and this is when, like, very close to 1965, that Moshe Dayan is writing this or giving this talk. And so he's also saying that otherwise the sword will slip from our fist and our life will be snuffed out. So we have to be that tenacious. And so basically, this is all about the chapter. And now I can have
Thank
questions.
you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sure this has encouraged our audience to look at our book very soon. Thank you very much for your invaluable contribution to the edited volume. Because I think it's a very important perspective. I mean, looking at the issue from a literature point of view, and from the point of view of someone who has lived through this, experience. So, in order to not exceed our time, I just want to ask one question, and then I will pass to our next participant. When you were talking about, the lived experiences of displaced Palestinians within the example of Gada Kharmi, a question came to my mind about the balance between the interests of human beings with the interest of the natural environment and also with the politics on the scene. So how do you think these challenges can be addressed?
See, when she talks about the landlocked, the places, and you know that all, the western border of Palestine, I would call it Palestine, which is now Israel. It is like it is getting ample sunshine, everything, sea, they have got the sea coast with them. Whereas the West Bank, like it is relegated to that area. So then similarly, there are 101 examples given in the book, and we see them across the vineyards, let's say. The Israeli vineyards, they are flourishing, and the neighbor's vineyard is being, like, the water is being cut off. So these are on ground happenings. They are hounded sometimes, the neighbors, they are the Palestinians there, and this is a normal norm, that they are hounded by dogs in order to threaten them to be out of their land. So this is like land appropriation, and this is, can we call it migration? No, this is it's such a big forced eviction. So, and that's how it is.
Yeah, I understand it better now. Thank you very much. As you have said, it's not just massacring a group of people. It's also massacring the land, confiscating their properties and their right to live in this land. Thank you very much. Now, please allow me to pass to our next speaker, Dr. Burak Güneş, who will be talking about the international law and its relation to climate-induced migration. The floor is yours, Dr. Burak.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Dr. Ibrahim Efe, thank you for inviting me here to discuss such an emerging and hot topic, climate change and migration. I contributed to the book with 2 chapters. Both of them were co-authored and published by Inside Turkey previously. With this opportunity, I would like to thank Dr. Bengü Çelenk and Dr. Haydar Karaman for writing these articles together. They couldn't attend today's activity, but I brought their warmest salute to you. As I said, there were 2 articles that we wrote. I wrote the very first one with Dr. Bengü Çelenk, entitled The Impasse of International Law on Climate-Induced Migration, Recent Developments, and United Nations January 2020 Decision on Climate Refugees. Before touching upon the first article that we written with Dr. Bengü Çelenk, I would like to say that I'm working on, public international law, not directly migration or climate change, but this topic really took my attention, and Dr. Bengü Çelenk had her PhD on climate change. Therefore, we thought that we can write an article relating to, refugees and climate change. So this article or this chapter, is the result of this discussion. The very first part of the chapter deals with climate change and its effects on developing countries in the Pacific Ocean or islands. The second part of the article, related to the first part, of course, considers a Kiribati, citizens' application for getting refugee status from New Zealand. So, the first chapter that I'm talking about, we ask, the research question of this chapter is that we ask whether climate-induced problems enable people to receive refugee status. Mr. Teitoitas, he is a Kiribati citizen who migrated to New Zealand because of the problems, climate-induced problems in Kiribati, according to him. And after a while, he applied to the New Zealand authority to receive refugee status. And, we took Mr. Territorial's application as as an example, because we thought that this sample or this example very well serves the purpose of this article. After his application, domestically, the New Zealand courts believed that, let me quote from here, domestic courts of New Zealand, in general, they believe that the point this judgment makes is that climate change and its effect on the countries like Kiribati is not appropriately addressed under the Refugee Convention. Let me continue. In other words, according to the court's findings, for the reasons apparent in previous sections of this judgment, a sociological refugee or person seeking to better his or her life by escaping the perceived results of climate change is not a person to whom Article 1A2 of the Refugee Convention applies. Here you see that the domestic courts of New Zealand makes a formalist reading of the law. They say that in the Refugee Convention, a refugee is defined as a person who has, fear to persecution because of his, nationality, or there's 4 features. And if you are applying for refugee status by bringing climate change as a base for your argument, we cannot accept this, because a climate refugee, the term climate refugee, is not, written or drafted in the Refugee Convention of 1951. This is very formalist reading of international law. And after a while, after exhausting domestic courts, Mr. Teitoita returned to Kiribati by New Zealand authorities. And New Zealand authorities says that because of the climate change, the right to life of Mr. Teitoita, or right to adequate food, clothing, and housing under, as you know, twin conventions of United Nations. One is the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, and the other one is International Convention on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. They are not violated by Kiribati government, so that Mr. Teitoita's right to life or right to adequate food, clothing, and housing are not violated by Kiribati and New Zealand. And after a while, as you see, Mr. Teitoita returned to his home, Kiribati. Afterwards, he applied to the United Nations Human Rights Committee. As you know, this committee established to monitor the implementation of the International Convention of Civil and Political Rights. This is not a court, but it is a committee, consists of experts, and they can, hear some cases. Committee's judgment or committee's, hearings is really important in the development of refugee law, because committee says that, committee's findings, regarding climate change and non-refoulements are remarkable, saying that, let me quote from committee's, finding. The committee says that environmental degradation, climate change, and unsustainable development constitute some of the most pressing and serious threats to the ability of present and future generations to enjoy the right to life. So, let me continue. Committee also observed that severe environmental degradation can adversely affect an individual's well-being and lead to a violation of the right to life. So, as you see here, committee actually touches upon, the issue, or if touch upon or try to understand or investigate whether there is a violation of the right to life of Mr. Teitoita by returning Mr. Teitoita to, Kiribati. After, evaluating many factors that may violate the petitioner's right to life and therefore may trigger Article 6 of the Convention, the committee came up with the result, that the petitioner's right to life, as articulated under Article 6.1 of the Convention, was not violated by the government of New Zealand. What does it mean? It means that by returning Mr. Teitoita to Kiribati is not a violation of the right to life articulated under Article 6 of the Covenant, because according to the committee, both New Zealand's government made a deep and wide investigation whether the returning of Mr. Teitoita to Kiribati would violate his right to life or not. And committee was of the view that yes, New Zealand did her best to investigate whether there is a if Teitoita was returned to Kiribati, would it mean that a violation of right to life would occur? And committee says that no, New Zealand is right here. But in committee's hearing, we can see that committee says that, but climate-induced problems may trigger or may violate a person's right to life under the covenant. This is the remarkable part of the committee's determination. In the concrete example, in the case that committee may say that okay, New Zealand did not violate Mr. Teitoita's right to life, but in theoretically, climate-induced problems may violate a person's right to life, and therefore these persons need some protections and they cannot be returned to their home. This is a remarkable progress in the non-refoulement or refugee law or migration issues. In our second article or second chapter in this book, it was co-authored with Dr. Haydar Karaman from Kilis University. We observed two remarkable decisions taken by United Nations Human Rights Council taken in 2021 and United Nations General Assembly in 2022 respectively. And we also took Haiti as a case. As you see in the first chapter, the application of Mr. Teitoita demanding protection and non-refoulement because of climate change can only be applied if the situation violates a person's right to life. In other words, people can enjoy the principles of non-refoulement by employing other rights, in the circumstances, right to life, if you base your argument, if you say that, okay, you cannot return me to my, hometown because there are problems, climate-induced problems, and these problems, enable me to, these problems may violate my right to life, and therefore you have no right to return me to my home country. But still, there's no universally accepted human rights principle that covers all these environmental issues. Of course, there are multiple initiatives domestically and internationally, but United Nations Human Rights Councils and United Nations General Assembly's resolutions were really great, steps in the progressive developments of human rights relating to climate change and sustainable development. So, in 2021, the United Nations Human Rights Council adopted the resolution and recognizing that the right to a clean, let me quote from the resolution, right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment as a human right that is important for the enjoyment of human rights, all human rights. And furthermore, the Council, notes that, let me quote again, the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is related to other rights and existing international law. The similar or the same, phrases are adopted by General Assembly as well. And United Nations General Assembly adopted adopted a historical resolution again determining that the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is a human right. And again notes that the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is related to other rights and existing international law. Technically speaking, United Nations General Assembly's resolutions are not binding instruments. If you talk about if you think that technically speaking, but these resolutions, of course, have great weight on the progressive developments of international law, and these resolutions, even though they are not binding, these resolutions have a really great, and innovative weight in the progressive developments of human rights, especially regarding climate change and sustainable development, and of course migration. And again, there is one more critical, determination made by General Assembly. Let me quote from the resolution. General Assembly says that environmental degradation. This is my last sentences, moderate hocam. Environmental degradation, climate change, biodiversity loss, desertification, and unsustainable development constitute some of the most pressing and serious threats to the ability of present and future generations to enjoy all human rights effectively. Thus, the General Assembly interrelated and all other human rights with this newly emerged one, including the right to life and principle of non-refoulement. Thank you so much for listening me.
Thank you, Dr. Burak. Well, it's very interesting to hear that a single case, the case of Mr. Teitoya, has caused such a big uproar in the international community and actually has given rise to a very hot discussion regarding the ambits of the international law. So what I'm wondering about this case is that since it has certain ramifications, wider ramifications for all states, what are the potential implications of climate-induced migration, and how should policymakers address these implications?
In the first article written with Dr. Bengu Cheng, we propose that the state system is based upon two basic principles. This is sovereignty and equality of nation states or states. And in the first article, we say that sovereign states, will have to, this is our prediction, will have to adopt new instruments dealing with this newly emerged, problematic area. Why? Because whether they satisfy or not, the external issues such as climate change will force them to adopt new regulations. And after we wrote this article, we witnessed that with the effort of course, Pacific Islands peoples, they really pay great attention to bring this issue before public opinion, and they really contributed to this issue. And after a year, we wrote this article. We witnessed that in United Nations Human Rights Council adopted this resolution, and just after a year passed this resolution, United Nations General Assembly adopted the same provision. So we are really optimistic that states will have to deal with these emerging threats. Let me give you one more example and give the floor to you. Recently, we published another article with Dr. Bengu Cheng again. We, investigated the direct effects of climate change to United States of America's military bases. Because of the sea level rises, or the bases located in the deserts, because of the heat waves, United States now has to, change the locations of their already located bases just because of the climate change. And this is the last sentence that I would like to mention. Again, all the states will have to face with this emerging threat and will have to, adopt some regulations. This is our prediction to tackle with this threat.
Well, let's hope that all states take this
or most
warnings
of them
serious. Well, let's hope that most of them take them serious, at least, so that we can at least have a concrete approach to what we are going to do. After having experienced a big earthquake in Turkey, in the region where I'm living in now, I think displacement is not very far from human beings from now on. So we should all reflect on this emergency. So thank you very much. I think it's a very critical contribution to the edited volume, because the international law kind of decides on the ambits within which we can talk about displacement across nations. So moving from this point, I would like to give the floor to our third and final participant, who will be talking about the socio-economic composition of Syrian refugees in Turkey. Yes, Dr. Yunus, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ibrahim. So first of all, before I start, I would just like to thank the setup for holding this panel, and special thanks to Dr. Efe for his kind invitation. So as the moderator have said, that my topic is about the socio-economic composition of Syrian refugees in Turkey, and I'll just give a brief kind of review about the chapter. So the current state of the studies of the Syrian refugees, there's kind of two kind of trends we can see from the current studies. First, almost all the literature has suggested that the integration process is kind of a needed process for helping the refugees to be integrated into the host country, so which is quite important. And another thing, another kind of feature which we can find from the refugee study is that most of them treat the refugees in a kind of homogeneous way. Like they consider them as same kind of people. Like mostly they depict them as poor or need help, like aid receivers or burden. Rather, but they neglect the kind of diversified kind of nature of socioeconomic compositions. So different from the previous studies, my chapter was trying to examine the situation of the Syrian refugees with a focus on their socioeconomic composition and what kind of possible potential resources they could contribute to their host countries. So the aim was trying to provide a different picture of the refugees that goes beyond their depiction as burden or as inherently disadvantaged persons. So at the end, the chapter will argue that the demographic and socioeconomic composition of the population of Syrian refugees living in Turkey should be examined more closely, because this might offer an alternative their images, poor, resourceless, and homogeneous group. So a brief review of the nature of relocation of Syrians, we can see that they were putting out the... Yeah.
I think you are having some connection problem right now because
can you hear me
I can't hear you properly.
Oh,
Is
really?
it possible that you can maybe you can switch to the laptop's own microphone? Can you unplug your headphone? We can't hear you now. No, we can't hear you. No. Unfortunately, no, we can't hear you. No, we can't hear you again.
So is this okay?
Yes, this is fine.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Maybe I'll just speak
Please
closer
continue.
to the microphone. So talking about the nature of the relocation of the Syrians, first of all, they are moving out very quickly, rapidly. And then another feature is that they are unselective movement. Like people moving out from various backgrounds. It's not just like to a certain group of immigrants or a certain kind of social groups of Syrians moving out of the countries. So it means that it's almost like everyone who are facing kind of a security issue, they need to leave the countries. And there were not that many choices for them to choose. Like we know that situation in Lebanon was quite difficult for the Syrians since the historical ties may be a bit kind of sensitive. And Jordan, although it was quite open in the very beginning, but later on it just closed its borders. And Iraq was like also a messy country, so the Syrians were not willing to go there, except the one going to the northern part of Turkey, or northern part of Iraq. And Europe, not to say we know that they have a very strict kind of policy. Only the Syrians who have some money and have in good health situation and have a strong will can reach Europe. So only Turkey is the one who is having the opening arm for receiving the Syrians. And there are challenges for hosting refugees. Like there are both negative and positive kind of results. Like from negative perspective, they might say that they will increase the security issue and damage the environment situation, or they will make the economic situation become much even worse because of the basic needs will become much higher, the prices, the rent, and they might have other kind of negative social impacts to the host societies. But if we look into the point, the demographic and socio-economic composition of the Syrian refugees in Turkey, we can see from the graph, like there are 17.4% of the Syrian refugees in Turkey are between the age from 0 to 4 and above 60s. So those are the most fragile group of people who are really in need of help. And later we can see the 30.6% of Syrian refugees in Turkey, they are between the age of 5 to 17. They are also in the teenage year and the schooling age. But the interesting thing is that we have around 52% of Syrian refugees which are located between the age of 18 to 59. So what does this mean? It means that more than half of the Syrian refugees in Turkey are in their kind of strongest working kind of period in their life. And if we look a bit further into this kind of demographic compositions, we can see their kind of socioeconomic composition is quite diversified. Like we have workers, of course, many of them they are workers, but in addition to the workers, there are also many like business people among the Syrian refugees inside Turkey. Like nowadays, there are more than 11,000 Syrian companies has been established inside Turkey. So they pay taxes, they recruit accountants, and they pay rents, and they recruit workers inside the country. And in addition to the business people, there are also doctors, Syrian doctors who are living inside Turkey. But it seems that the doctors, they cannot work legally inside the country, so they might encounter with some kind of issues. So some of them were forced to flee Turkey again, and others will stay inside Turkey but working as an illegal clinic. And also we have a lot of teachers, Syrian teachers coming to the countries, which the good thing is the Turkish government is recruiting these teachers to try to put them into the formal institution inside the state. And the last group I observe is about the students in the universities. Although there are some kind of criticism about these students, seems they do not need to pay the fees of the tuitions in the public universities. But if we think in another way, they still need to pay for the rents, the living costs, and for their entertainment fees. And more importantly, after they graduated from the university inside Turkey, they will be fluent in the Turkish language, and definitely they'll find a job inside Turkey. So for these groups of people, from business people, doctors, teachers, and students, they are around like 100,000. So they can be considered as a different or non-typical kind of type of the refugees we perceived. So what kind of impact they can bring to the country? Economically speaking, like definitely they have a capital input. No matter the business people or the teachers, doctors, or students, they all spend their monies to inside the country. So it's like a direct capital input into Turkey. And second, it's like a brand gain for the for Turkey, right? Because these people, they used to work back inside Syria, and now they just moved to Turkey, so they can utilize their knowledge or skills and inside the country. And third, I think it's the expansion of the international networks. Since these are Arabs and they are more familiar with the Arabic culture, so they can, after they settle inside the country, they still sustain or try to expand their network in other Arabic countries. So these are, I think, are the kind of positive impacts they can bring to the countries. So the study was not intended to suggest that Turkish locals or the government do not experience any negative effects from the arrival of Syrians, but it attempts to present a different way of understanding the so-called burden of their presence. So the study suggests that it would benefit the local authorities to have a clearer and deeper understanding of the socio-economic composition of the Syrian populations in Turkey. So by developing like an understanding, the governments could not only alleviate their expenditure on the refugee crisis because they know who have more kind of economic ability and who can do a certain kind of job, but they can also channel available and appropriate people and their abilities into the society. For example, the doctors, we know that once the Turkish government received like 4 to 5 millions of refugees, especially the Arab refugees, into its countries, these people, they might need to access to the medical supports. But what we heard is that usually these patients, Arab patients, they have kind of difficulties, not only the Arab patients, but also the Turkish doctor, they have difficulties for communications. So if the government can try to recruit or try to put these doctors, Syrian doctors, into some certain kind of positions, then they might help to solve this kind of language barrier. So this could ease the tense relationship between locals and Syrians, since it is understandable that indigenous citizens consider refugees as economically poor and needful of the host government to meet their daily requirements. So by doing so, having a better understanding of the diversified socioeconomic compositions, in my opinion, this can facilitate not only to the refugees' living condition, but also for the Turkish nation, for the Turkish people. So that's the main ideal about the chapter. Hopefully, the beginning part wasn't cut it that much. So
well, I'm sure the audience will, catch up with you when they read the chapter. Hopefully, so with this final speech, we will close soon. But before, I want to ask a question, to Dr. Ching-An. And please, if you have any questions, Dr. Burak and Dr. Rabia, please feel free to ask your questions to each other. Dr. Yunus, there is a big discussion regarding the return of Syrian refugees in Turkey right now. And despite the problems and all the challenges that we are facing, Turkey still hosts the biggest refugee community in the world, and it has been a very problematic process both for the host community and the refugee community itself. And there's a big discussion regarding the return of Syrian refugees back to Syria. However, it's a very difficult process, as we all know, because Syria is not the same country anymore, and the drop in the overall rainfall is observable, and Syria and Turkey will be one of the worst affected areas from global warming. So how do you think this return discussions is related to our main theme, the climate change discussion? Do you think any potential return of Syrian refugees will be affected by this discussion in any sense, or is it not related to the discussion at all?
You mean the discussion about climate migration?
Yes, I mean, the areas that Syrian refugees moved from in Syria are the northern Syria, and these areas are mostly populated by farmers. They're not very industrial, except for maybe Halep. So in any case of return, let's say Syrian refugees would like to return at some point, but will this be affected in any way by global warming or climate change in a sense?
Yeah, actually,
have you noticed?
I'm not very familiar with the climate change issue, but from what I've known, I think the situation is not mature enough for the Syrians to return, no matter climately speaking or security speaking, because the situation there, I think that you see they have a kind of a disease a few months ago because of the water issue, because of pollution. So I mean, this is related to climate maybe, or environment at least. So the situation there is not stable enough for people to return back for living, no matter, because also we see the earthquake issue, right? Just a few months ago, mainly the major point of the center point of earthquake was in Turkey, but also affect hardly to the Syrians in the northern part, especially the northern part. So from a climate perspective, of course, it's also not possible for them to return. Yeah, I mean, it's not standable, maybe.
I see. So have you interviewed anyone from the farming industry? Any Syrian entrepreneurs or, those who were farmers in Syria before they moved to Jordan, to Egypt or Syria? But
I've interviewed some Syrian farmers before, but they were not in Turkey. The one I interviewed, they were in Jordan. They were like planting mushrooms. And inside Turkey, most of the Syrian business people I interview are mostly in the commercial industrial sectors. I rarely heard anyone from the farming sectors, but I suppose there are some. Yeah, but the skill may not be that strong.
It's because people who moved to Turkey are from northern Syria, and Halep is famous for its being commercial center of Syria.
Yes.
So that's understandable. So thank you very much. I don't have any more questions to any of you. I feel already very sorry for taking your time in the middle of night for Rabia, Aamir, and morning for Dr. Yunus. So if you would like to add anything, please feel free to do so. Or if you have any questions to our speakers, to each other. Otherwise, I would like to thank you for joining us today for this panel discussion. Do you have anything?
Thank you, Dr. Ibrahim. And what I would like to say is that there is a difference between, changing your place yourself willingly and, migrating, or you're forced to migrate. So the problematics, the forced migrations, they pose problems for the host countries as well as the migrating communities, and also to the climate, certainly to the climate, because if they were taking care of, if we take it to the ground level, if they were taking care of the land of a certain place, but they've been evicted from that place. That land goes barren. So it definitely has that impact.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rabia, for this clarification.
The sustainability also. Yes.
Sure. Thank you very much for this clarification. Dr. Burak, would you like to add anything?
I don't have any question to any of you. I would like to thank you for your insightful presentations, and it's really great for me to be part of this panel. Thank you for inviting me again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you for joining us today for this insightful panel discussion. The topics we covered today, including climate-induced migration, displacement, and Syrian refugees, and the legal and ethical implications of being displaced, as Dr. Rabia has explained. These are very critical issues that require the ongoing attention of international community and their action, of course. So it's our hope that this discussion has provided some valuable insights and perspectives to inform future efforts aimed at addressing the challenges posed by climate change. I hope that we continue to work together towards a sustainable and equitable future for all of us. And I would like to thank again to our to panelists. Also, I would like to remind our audience that they can watch this video anytime they want when it is uploaded on YouTube, SETA YouTube channel. And please continue following us on Twitter, SETA Twitter account or Inside Turkey Twitter account. We'll be coming up with more exciting, hopefully exciting panels. And I would like to thank to our audience who have preferred to watch us, to watching the national team's sports match tonight. And hopefully they will be watching our panel afterwards. And thank you very much again. Hope to see you in person soon. Thank you very much.